In this module, we're going to be talking about all about money management. So I boiled this down to a few key points that I want to spell out for you so that you can be on your way to building a 7-figure real estate business. First and foremost, our not so friendly friend in the business, taxes, the IRS. So what's important to understand around paying taxes is that, like, listen, I'm not an accountant, not claiming to be an accountant. Obviously, for tax advice, you want to make sure you speak to an accountant. I'm going to talk about more high-level business information, not the actual tax strategies, okay? Because obviously, for a lot of you watching this, you're all over the country. There's going to be a lot of different tax strategies you guys can be following. So again, follow your accountant's information. Again, this is just more business information. So the first thing I always like to make sure that we talk about is that all of your money needs to be paid into an LLC. And I know this sounds rudimentary, but if you do not have an LLC set up for your business, you are truly just wasting opportunities for tax write-offs, which again, your accountant will explain to you. So it's very, very important that you pay attention to the fact that it is a crucial opportunity in your business for savings on your taxes to be looking into starting an LLC ASAP. Because also the cool part about understanding LLCs and the tax information is that I'm not here to tell you which way or not to go, but it's important to understand that as you're continuing to make money, there are different ways that you can quote, pay yourself, okay, whether that's distributions or a salary, basically allow you to write off more money and pay taxes differently. Which again, based on what your accountant tells you, it's gonna be very, very important that these types of small little changes that you're going to quote, pay yourself, right, is going to allow you to save a lot of money in taxes. Now again, I'm not telling you to do this at certain times in your business. There's a time, depending on your income and depending on your tax brackets, where it makes sense to be paid as a salary. And then there's going to be other times where it's better to be paid as distributions. But again, make sure you have a meeting with your accountant. I like to meet with my accountant typically once a quarter, just to make sure everything is up to date. We're you know, all the boxes are checked. We're moving in the right direction. Everything is going smoothly. Taxes are being paid. You just want to make sure, because again, if you do not pay your taxes, it is going to cause you a lot of unneeded stress in your business. So this is sort of just make sure you get an LLC and make sure you speak with your accountant. Point number one. Point number two is all about running your operations when it comes to the financials of the business. The biggest strains on a real estate business is overspending. This is, I mean, obviously this is for a large majority of either businesses as well as people globally. We just spend too much money. And the problem when you spend too much money is that typically you're not left with a decent profit margin, and therefore it's almost counterintuitive to even have the business in the first place. Because if you end the year with less money than you did when you started, it's sort of like, was the year even worth it? You could have just had a simple job and everything would have been even, right? You could have just had a regular job instead of having a business with all this stress and all this anxiety, right, that you had to deal with and go out there, you know, work 100-hour work weeks to make what could be decent money to end up with less money at the end of the day. When in reality, it's truly all about how much do you keep. Because it's not just about how much money you make, it's about how much money do you keep. One thing I like to stress here in this part of the module is that it's about how efficient you run your real estate business. If you're getting massive value out of this video and you want to work with me personally, make sure you check out the first link in the description down below and schedule your free consultation with myself and my team. Higher margins are incredibly important to pay attention to. So this is really just a quick talk about if you are not quote, on a budget in your business and in your life, you're going to have a tough time financially almost forever. It's just going to be more complicated than it has to be. And especially when you have everything under wraps of exactly how much money you're spending each and every single month in your business and in your personal life, it gives you some good clarity and you can sleep easy at night because you know if you're in a good margin or a bad margin. If you're in a bad margin, you know where the mistakes are being made, so you can make those adjustments. So one quick thing that I do recommend is QuickBooks. Download QuickBooks. I don't have a link. I'm not trying to sell you on QuickBooks. I just use QuickBooks. Get it. I think something like it where, again, or you can have your accountant do all your accounting for you and your bookkeeping, but I believe it's very, very important to use QuickBooks or something similar where you can actually keep track of every single dollar, where it's going, how much you're spending, how much you're making each and every single month. I am a huge advocate of QuickBooks. The other thing I want to pay attention to now is like now that you're starting to, you have an LLC, you're paying attention to tax strategies with your accountant, you're meeting with them frequently, now you're using QuickBooks and you're analyzing each and every single dollar that you're making, it is very, very crucial that you pay attention to the next two things. Number one, when you are spending money, it is very, very important to understand that if you are spending money for advertising, for rent, for hiring, right? Those are going to be the main three things that people spend too much money on. Advertising, that means paid money on Zillow, Realtor.com. That can be for sale signs. That can be anything around marketing that you're spending money on for advertising, right? Facebook ads, you name it, okay? So a lot of people spend too much money on advertising. Second thing is people spend too much money on rent. So if you're not paying any rent, kudos to you. But if you are paying rent, it is time to pay attention to how much money you're spending on rent and is it actually lucrative for you to do that. Sure, you find a cheaper place to be, right? It's very important that you look at things like WeWork. There's a lot of other ways where you can have smaller space and it can be just as lucrative. And the last thing is staff. People pay too much money for staff. So how much money are you paying on these three buckets? Do you have too much staff? Are you appropriately staffed, overstaffed? Are you understaffed? Maybe you don't have enough employees to actually manage the workload and you should probably hire somebody, but it doesn't mean they need to be full-time. Maybe you have one full-time person and then no one else. Maybe you could have two part-time people where the total cost would be less overall. There's multiple different ways to look at this, and it's time to pay attention to these few things here, because at the end of the day, if hypothetically you're making $10,000 a month, but you're spending $8,000 a month to run and operate your business, you're making $2,000 a month. That doesn't make any sense, right? Because then the only way to truly, you have to earn your way out of the issue that you're having. But if you're running a very efficient business where it only costs you $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000 a month as an example, because if you're only making $120,000 a year, you should not have a high expense business, right? A majority of the expenses when you're making $100,000 or $200,000 a year is probably going to be your own living and personal expenses, right? Which you're going to hopefully talk to your accountant about and work on some write-offs. But it is very important to understand when you're making $300,000, $500,000, $1 million or more per year, not only are you paying attention to the tax strategies, but again, I've had some times which, and I've taught this on several other webinars, I had like a $95,000 income month, okay? This was December of 2019. I just had this exact slide up. I'm gonna see if I can find a picture for you, but I had this month where I made $95,000. It was me and my team, so I had a couple of realtors who were also getting paid. So the way it was broken down though, is that I made $95,000 in gross commissionable income. My team was paid $95,000 on the 14 closings we had that month. Okay? On the $95,000, I paid out $40,000 in commissions. So I had a couple of agents who were tied to a couple of the deals that I closed. They got paid $40,000 in total. I think it was like 3 agents got split $40,000 total. Okay? With the remaining amount of money, $55,000. I had staff to pay, rent to pay, marketing costs to pay, supplies to pay for, all this other stuff that I had to pay for, which cost me about $35,000. And then I was left with $20,000, and on my $20,000, I had to pay taxes and then live on my 20 grand. So I had to pay taxes on 20,000. I'm left with like 10 or 12 grand. And it's like at the end of the day, I live on 10 or 12,000 a month. So it's like I was barely breaking even every month, making $95,000 a month. But I wasn't paying attention to these key things where I could have had a much more efficient version of the same team, where now that's what I have today, where, an average month I'll make between, $100,000 to $250,000 a month, but I have a very low margin, right? Where I'm only spending probably somewhere around $15,000 to $25,000 at most in cost to run and operate my business. So I'm at a rough 80% rough margin to run my company. So I have an 80% margin. That means of every dollar that I'm getting, 80 cents goes into my account to then pay taxes on. My net taxable income is 80 cents on the dollar, which is great. And my personal, my personal life is really the biggest expense because I like to travel. I like to spend some money, right? Like we like to enjoy our life. We go on a lot of nice trips. We pay for a lot of other people and we support a lot of other people. So the point is that my biggest expense is really my personal life. Right, but that's again my after-tax income, and a lot of those things are also write-offs that we also, again, I spoke to my accountant, and these things are write-offs. So that's how I'm able to make sense of a lot of this stuff. So that's why I'm saying it's important to run it as a business. And the most important piece of it is how much money do you keep at the end of the day? How much money do you net? How much are you saving each and every single month? Is your net worth growing? Is your net worth dying every month, right? Is it going the wrong way? So that's why it's important to understand. Just because you make $100,000 a month doesn't make you rich. Because I know some people who make $100,000 a month and they're saving $5,000 a month, but I know other people who make $25,000 a month and they're saving half of it. It's all about how much money you keep, how much money you save, and how much money you're investing. That's the important piece of it. And then to break this apart here, because this is gonna wrap up the couple points here. Like we talked about, I have an 80% margin, and I learned this from a coach, because at first, when I came into the coaching company that I was a part of, my margins were ridiculously low. Right? I was making and again, like in my example, making $95,000 a month and then making basically 10 grand a month at the end of the day. You can even say it was a 30% margin, but then minus taxes and other expenses, I was only left with about 10% at the end of the day. That is not a great business. What's important to pay attention to is now today, my net savings is through the roof, my net taxable income is through the roof, is because now I've been able to structure my business with a very low overhead. It's important to not only just make a lot of money, but to net and save a lot of money like we've been alluding to. So that comes down to these few points. First and foremost, your living expenses. How crazy do you live right now? Because I know some people who, again, you're making $20,000 a month for maybe the first time in your entire life, kudos to you, but you spend $20,000 a month. So you're not making anything, you're not saving anything, and you sometimes don't even have enough money to pay taxes. It's a scary as hell place to be. Make sure you're paying attention to your living expenses. expenses. Most people overspend. Most people are not saving a lot of money every single month because they spend too much money. And guess what? I've been there for like 2 years of my life. It was terrible. I was making $1 million a year on paper, right? But in reality, I wasn't. It was terrifying, right? It wasn't a lot of fun. Very, very important lesson that I learned. And that's why, like, again, pay attention to your business right now. I was overspending by a lot of money. Spending $30,000 to $40,000 a month between my rent, my marketing, and my staffing. My staffing was the most expensive thing for me, right? I had way too much staff. There was no reason for me to have a $10,000 to $15,000 per, bi-weekly payroll, right? I mean, think about it. I was spending almost $400,000 a year on staff costs, and there's just no reason for it. I have like 1.5 staff members, or really 1 full-time and 2 part-time people who manage all of my transactions now, and I make 3 times as much money gross income. So it's like, why on planet Earth why did I need that, right? That's the important thing to pay attention to here. So again, we talked about personal life. Make sure your margin, what I learned from my past mentors and coaches is that it is very, very crucial to have margins that are as close to 60 or 70% or more. So that's not 50 cents of every dollar, it's more than 50 cents of every dollar. It needs to be net taxable. So you only have this much room on every gross dollar. So if you have a sales team and you have a lot of salespeople, you have to understand, if you're giving 50% away to a salesperson and your margins are 50% or less, how much money are you actually making? Zero. And again, like, if your margins, let's just say if they're not 70%, it means you're losing money on every single deal. But if you can have a 70% margin at a minimum, and you pay somebody 50-50 as an example, a part of your team that we're building here, on a 50-50 margin, they get 50% and say $10,000. You're at a 70-cent margin of every dollar that comes in, which means you're only spending $3,000 in total cost. It means you have a $7,000 margin, which means that on a $5,000 check to you, because you have a $10,000 check, you make 5 because you're paying up 50%, you're gonna net $2,000, and you had nothing to do with the deal. You're actually gonna be able to make money. That's how you actually have margins to build a team. However, if you had very low margins, I had very low margins and I had a team, so that's why my profitability was very low. But again, if you can condense your expenditures, you're gonna have a very, very high margin, which is going to also allow you to be very competitive in the marketplace and be able to give people great splits and offer opportunities for people. That's why I'm saying it's very, very important to have very, very high margins, low overhead. So we talk about having low overhead in your business, we talk about low overhead at home. To be honest, and it's taken me a long time to even come to this kind of mentality, but I'd rather make $1 million a year but take home $900,000 versus grossing $10 million a year in a business and your net income is only $500,000. Like, you understand? Like, I'd rather make less money but have a higher net income. People don't pay attention to this stuff. They just think, oh, he's making 10 million versus him making $1 million. Instead of having a crazy huge staff and all this other stuff, and obviously there's a lot of other characteristics here, but I'm just trying to make a point where, like, even if it's only $100,000, I'd rather make 100 where my net income, net, like, at the end of the day, I can save 100,000 a year or whatever the case may be. I'd rather be able to, instead of having a much larger team and all this extra overhead and net the same amount and net the same money. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Pay attention to the fact that it's all about net, right? Your net taxable income, your net after taxes, your savings, and what you can invest every year. That's what's more important than how much money you gross. No one cares about your gross income. However, in the real estate world, we're like praised and we're given all these crazy awards for our gross income numbers. No one cares. But if we talked about how much money are you actually saving this year, they would be a very different leaderboard and people would pay attention to it differently. How much money are you saving and what's your profitability? Very, very different story. So just to quickly wrap up this, okay? Number 1, you want to set up an LLC, which you should be meeting with your accountant set up. It's very, very simple to set up, but meet with your accountant 4 times a year, once per quarter. Make sure that you have a QuickBooks account or a bookkeeper, which your accountant sometimes can be able to do that. You can just ask them for their advice, or you can just use QuickBooks, really, really simple. It's not that expensive at all. Then you're gonna be paying attention to your margins in your business. The goal is 70% or more. If you don't have 70% or more, you are probably spending too much money unnecessarily. I'm just gonna be honest with you. All the key things, make sure you're paying attention to your net. That's all that really matters. And again, in this part here, we're talking about the IRS is probably gonna be the most expensive thing that you pay for each and every single year, unless you're paying attention to tax strategies where you can legally pay very little taxes, right? Again, talk to your accountant. There's ways to do that. How much are you saving? How much are you investing each year? No one really talks about this types of stuff. And again, that's what a leaderboard should be about when it comes to real estate business. Who saved the most money this month? Who saved the most money this year? That's the most important thing. Who invested the most money this year, right? These are very, very important parts. I don't care about who makes the most money anymore. It just doesn't matter. You're like, wow, that guy invested, $2 million, or that guy has $2 million in the bank. That's what I care about most, right? Like, I want to be the guy that walks into a room and say, I might not have sold the most real estate, but I have the most money in the bank and I own the most real estate in every room I walk in. That's what's more important to me. little key mindset shift there, okay? And again, last but not least, is understanding like, listen, and again, a lot of people are talking about it these days, that it's all about your expenditures as a personal life, right? Like I understand, I've been, through ups and downs of crazy personal life expenditures, then I went through COVID and all kinds, listen, I've been everywhere, right? And it's really important to just understand, like, if you've never made a lot of money before, right? I've just always spent a lot of money. That's how my parents were. So I had to retrain myself to be fairly frugal. And I had to really out-earn my ability to spend, which thankfully has occurred. That being said though, it's like I'm working every day on how to cut costs. Like it's a practice that I have to work on. So again, for all of you guys listening, make sure you're understanding that, like, listen, if you spend way too much money at home, which means that you're most likely gonna spend way too much money in your business, which means that you're gonna have very low margins, and that no matter how much money you make, you're gonna find a way to spend it. Fix the problem first and then start making a lot more money, because I assure you it'll definitely catch up with you down the road. Other than that, guys, listen, this is a really important module to pay attention to, because it's all about the money, because that's all everyone ever cares about. I want to make more money, I want to live a better life, I want to have the freedom. This is what it's all about, and it's about getting to the brass tacks. How much are you spending? How are you managing your money? And what do your goals look like around it, okay? Make sure you have the right mindset too. Other than that, guys, I'll see you soon. I'll see you in the next module. Make sure you check out a lot of the downloadable content. They'll be able to help you. Make sure you rewatch this video several times over, because there's a lot of very, very important information in this module. And other than that, I'll see you in the next video. If you're getting massive value out of this video and you want to work with me personally, make sure you check out the first link in the description down below and schedule your free consultation with myself and my team.